The sea was calm that morning. Too calm. A thick mist hung low over the English Channel, silent, heavy like the world itself was holding its breath. And then it began. A thunder that wasn't from the sky, but from hundreds of warships colliding, wood shattering, men screaming, the ocean erupting into chaos. Arrows blotted out the sun. Fire spread across the decks. The water turned black with blood and oil. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre afloat. This was the day when two great kingdoms, England and France, didn't just fight for victory. They fought to erase each other from history. And by the end of it, the sea itself would remember their screams. This was the Battle of Sluys. The year is 1340. Europe is burning with rivalry. England and France, once tied by blood and faith, are now torn apart by greed, vengeance, and pride. The 100 Years' War has begun, and control of the seas will decide who lives and who is forgotten. King Edward III of England watches the horizon from the coast of Flanders. Behind him, 200 ships, each packed with soldiers, archers, and men who have never seen war, only heard of its glory. The salty air carries the scent of fear, though no one dares to admit it. Ahead, beyond the fog, waits the French fleet, anchored at a place called Sluys, and their numbers are terrifying. The French have over 200 massive warships, chained together in a deadly wall across the harbor's mouth. A floating fortress of wood and iron, no way in, no way out. Their commanders believe the English are walking into a slaughterhouse. But Edward has a plan, not one written in ink, but carved in instinct. As dawn breaks, the mist begins to move. The ocean whispers, restless. Somewhere out there, thousands of men are about to fight for gods, kings, and a history they'll never live to see. Then silence, a heartbeat, and a horn sounds. The English fleet surges forward. The sky erupts with arrows, the sound of war echoing across the sea. The first English ships smash into the French wall. The collision is brutal. Wood splinters, masts fall, men are crushed between ships. The sea becomes a stage of screams and smoke. Archers line the decks, raining arrows so thick they blot out the sun. The French respond with stones, fire, and fury. Edward stands at the bow of his flagship, shouting commands through the storm of chaos. His men fight not as sailors, but as warriors, leaping from ship to ship with axes and swords. The air fills with the clang of steel, the hiss of arrows, the roar of dying men. The battle has begun. The French believe their chained formation makes them invincible. But Edward sees their weakness. The very chains that bind them now trap them. He orders his ships to ram the outer line and board them one by one. The English swarm like fire over wood. French soldiers fall into the sea, their armor dragging them down into the black water. Hours pass. The tide begins to turn, literally. The current favors the English, pushing them closer, giving them momentum. Ship after ship falls under English control. Flames spread. The smell of burning tar fills the air. One French captain, desperate and defiant, orders his men to cut the chains and flee. But it's too late. The English have broken through the center. The harbor of Sluys is now a graveyard of ships burning, broken, and bleeding men. Edward's flag still flies. He has turned the sea into his kingdom. But the victory is far from clean. The water is thick with bodies, and the cries of the dying echo into the evening mist. Over 20,000 Frenchmen lie dead. The ocean has become their tomb. As night falls, Edward stands on the deck, staring at the fires still burning on the horizon. He knows this victory will echo across generations. But he also knows every empire that rises from the sea, one day, must return to it. The smoke hung over the water for hours, drifting across the coast like a shroud of death. Bodies floated between broken ships. Some still clung to wreckage, praying to gods who had already turned away. The sea that once glittered blue now looked black, thick with oil, blood, and shadows. The English had won, but the victory came at a price no one could count. King Edward III walked the deck in silence. His boots splashed through crimson water pooling between planks. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. The smell of burning wood and flesh was victory's only song. His captains gathered, their armor scorched, their faces smeared with smoke. None of them could speak. They'd seen men sliced apart, ships devoured by fire, and comrades dragged under by chains that once promised strength. On the French coast, chaos reigned. The news of defeat struck Paris like a hammer. France had believed its navy invincible. Now it was gone, swallowed whole by the English king. The ports fell silent. The crown panicked. The ocean, once their shield, had turned into a mirror of shame. But for Edward, this was just the beginning. His victory at Sluys opened the gates to France. The English army would now march across French soil with confidence, and their enemies would tremble at the sound of sails on the horizon. He sent word to England, "The Channel is ours." Bells rang across London. Crowds cheered. Poets called him the King of the Sea, but in the shadows of glory, whispers began to spread. Sailors spoke of ghosts on the water, pale faces rising through the waves at night, voices calling from beneath the hulls. They said the spirits of the French dead had cursed the Channel, doomed to drift forever where their ships had burned. Every English sailor who returned from Sluys carried that story home, eyes darker than before, as if they'd seen something beyond war. Weeks later, the surviving English ships limped back to port, their sails torn, hulls splintered, decks soaked in dried blood. The seagulls followed them in silence. No song greeted them, only the hollow wind. Edward ordered a mass burial for the fallen, both English and French. The priests spoke of victory, of God's will, of divine justice. But deep down, even Edward knew this wasn't God's will. It was man's, and man's hunger for power always demands the same price: blood. As the flames of the funeral pyres reached the sky, Edward turned away. He had won the battle, but the war, the 100 Years' War, had only just begun. And if the sea could bleed once, it would bleed again. Across the water, France was already preparing revenge. Shipbuilders worked day and night. Messengers rode through villages, gathering men, promising glory. The French king vowed that the English victory would be short-lived, that the next battle would see the Channel run red again. And in the distance, the sea moved. Restless, endless, whispering its ancient truth. No one truly conquers the ocean. The Battle of Sluys was not just a fight, it was a warning. The sea had shown its power. It had tasted human arrogance, and it would wait, as it always does, for the next storm to rise. Years passed, but the echoes of Sluys refused to fade. Every sailor who crossed the English Channel felt it, that uneasy calm, that whisper in the mist. The sea had memory, and it remembered the slaughter. For King Edward III, Sluys became the crown jewel of his legend. His power stretched across the seas, and his enemies feared the English flag. But power is a tide. It rises fast, and it always falls. Even as England celebrated, its navy began to rot beneath the surface. Ships aged, crews grew restless, and gold grew scarce. The war dragged on, swallowing lives and treasure faster than either side could count. In France, the scars of Sluys hardened into vengeance. French knights told their sons of the humiliation of ships burned, men drowned, honor stolen. For them, the sea became holy ground. Generations later, they would rebuild fleets not for defense, but for revenge. The spirit of Sluys would sail again. But beyond politics and power, there was something else, something darker. Fishermen along the coast began to report strange things. Lights flickering beneath the water, voices calling out during fog. nets coming up torn or filled with bones. Some swore they'd seen ghostly ships drifting through the mist, silent, burned black, crewed by shadows. They called it the Fleet of the Dead. No one dared sail at night near Sluys. Even the bravest captains avoided those waters. They said if you listened too closely, you could hear drums, the drums of that ancient battle, echoing from below the waves. Back in England, Edward grew older. Victories turned into stalemates. His sons quarreled, his kingdom strained under the weight of endless war. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the king would walk along the cliffs and stare out toward France. Those who saw him said he never looked at the land, only at the water, as if he could still see the ghosts moving beneath it. The Battle of Sluys was more than a military triumph. It was a transformation, the birth of English naval power, and the dawn of a new kind of warfare. No longer would battles be fought only on land. From that day forward, kings would fight for control of the oceans, and empires would rise and fall by the tide. Centuries later, sailors still tell the story. They say when the sea turns red at sunset, it's not just the light. It's memory, the blood of those who fell at Sluys, forever mixed with the salt and foam. They say the ocean never forgets the men who tried to command it. And maybe that's why the waves still whisper when the wind is right. Not of kings or crowns, but of men who drowned believing they could conquer the sea. Because in the end, no matter how many fleets are built or battles are won, the ocean always wins. The fires of Sluys may have faded, but their smoke still drifts across history. The ocean remembers every scream, every flame, every dream that sank beneath its waves. The Battle of Sluys wasn't just a clash of ships. It was the moment mankind realized the sea can never truly be conquered. Centuries have passed, empires have come and gone, but the water still holds their echoes. And somewhere, beneath the waves of the North Atlantic, another story waits, one even darker, even more mysterious. A storm where fate and fury collided once again. The sea has many secrets, and this was only the beginning. If you're ready to uncover what the ocean tried to hide, stay with us, because in Sea Shadows, the past is never buried. It just waits beneath the tide.